We are about to start the second part of the day, and we have a panel called the Enterprise IoT Opportunity. So I'm delighted to be joined by Tom, Greg, Enrico and Martin for this. So we're going to ask everyone to introduce themselves briefly. Start at the end. Martin, do you want to kick us off, please?
Yeah, testing. No, Martin Tufft, Director of IoT for BT. So what does that actually mean? So I run on a pan-BT basis the build of our IoT solutions that we take to market. I also run our business development function and our sales function and our go-to-market strategy into all of the sales channels and routes to market. So that'd be BT Global Services, BT Public Sector, BT Business and BT Ventures. And it's lovely to see so many BT people here in the audience today as well.
Thank you. Greg?
Hi everyone, my name is Greg Leonard. I'm with Cisco Jasper. I'm a technical executive there and co-lead the region for the Cisco Jasper business here in Europe, the Middle East, Africa and Russia. My predominant role is working with the service providers that take on board our SaaS solution. It's connectivity management and help them with their go-to-market models and enable their sales organizations then to sell cellular IoT.
Thank you. Tom?
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Tom Gardner, and I'm responsible for MVNO and IoT within the Hutchison Group, or more commonly known as the 3 Group. And what that actually means is, how do we position ourselves and the 12 mobile networks we own around the world to major customers looking to do business in IoT and MVNO, but also how do we deploy IoT and MVNO capabilities centrally that all 12 of our mobile operators can access and deploy to their local markets?
Thank you. And Enrico?
Yes, good morning. Enrico Bagnasco. I'm with Team Telecom Italia. Been with this company for a number of years, did many jobs, mainly in network engineering for the core, the access, fixed and mobile service platform. I'm now head of innovation, which is kind of fun job, reporting directly to the CTO. And so I manage all the new or semi-new things. Actually, IoT is more passing on from new things to regular things, and my job includes, of course, 5G and network cloudification and other projects.
And are you a Juventus fan? Or are you okay this morning?
I am.
Oh,
So
second one.
It's another difficult day.
Bang, don't get him started.
You don't want to get into it.
Well, listen, as this panel indicates, we're very much focused on what telcos are doing with the enterprise space in the IoT. This is going to be followed by a very consumer-focused one. But really, I'm going to kind of get all the operators here to kind of give us an overview of what they are doing in the space to target enterprises. So specifically, talking about some of the verticals that they're targeting, and maybe give some examples of a project or two that are kind of working on at the moment and that. So, Martin, I'm going to start with you. Talk about maybe some of the verticals that you're targeting. This obviously follows really neatly on from Stefano this morning, who was talking about being very sort of specific, looking at particular ones when you're not looking at pure connectivity play.
Yeah, okay. I think from a BT point of view, I think the first thing that there's 3 key elements I'd like to talk to you about. The first one is we have built a centre of excellence in BT as a focus area for IoT. So within that, as I described earlier in my introduction, that's where all of the products and services in BT are being developed for IoT. We're building sales expertise for IoT, but it's also hugely important to us that we get the much broader BT and we get IoT embedded in the discussions that we're having in our customers in all of those sales channels and all of those routes to market. So the Centre of Excellence is just what it says, but we want to broaden out and embed the IoT story for BT as one of our key strategic pillars. And as far as the verticals are concerned, you're going to see a lot of above the line stuff from BT in the coming year about what we're doing with IoT. But I think one of the examples that we could quite easily pick out, and I think it's just not just about vertical focus, but it's also about horizontal focus. So, but to pick out a particular vertical that we're having quite a lot of success in is retail. And I think retail is a great example of where customers aren't necessarily looking for, well, they're not looking for IoT solutions. What they're looking for is solutions to business problems. So an example is we've got solutions in the retail space regarding customer analytics. So we can tell one of our customers where their customers are in the store, what they're doing in the store, and predict what they're likely to do when they go into the store. We've also got customer engagement solutions. So how do you interact with that customer once they are in the store? We've also got digital signage. So how do you advertise to that particular customer in the store? And the final one is merchandising analytics. So how do you make sure that all of the stock in the store is in the right place? So that would be traditionally how you come at it from a product point of view. But from a customer point of view, and when I say customer, I mean the retailer, what the retailer wants to do is transform the experience that they give to that customer that's walking through the store. So we all know that retail has been managing footfall for many, many years now. But how do you increase the value of each person that walks through the store by improving that experience? And that's what those products and services do. There's a massive threat to many parts of the retail vertical from online shopping, for example. So it's really important, and different retailers want to do it in different ways. And IoT is a great example of how you can really start to solve some business problems, but we need to make sure as an industry we're talking about the business problems and not the products and services.
Lovely, thank you. From one incumbent to another, Enrico, would you like to give a little taste of what Telecom Italia are doing in terms of targeting enterprises with IoT?
Yes. First, a couple of words of introduction to our thinking, which is much related to many things we've heard this morning as well. Indeed, we know IoT is so wide as a concept, as a market. You need to probably segment the market in different things. I mean, within the same title, we consider things that are very different. You know, you go from peg tracking, which is best effort, approach solution. You can go to smart agriculture. That means lots of lands, very little broadband. You go to connected car. You go to cloud robotics. So we think we need to segment our approach because there are many different things. And of course, there are many different SLAs related to this business. So I must like very much what Vodafone said this morning, which by the way, I agree. Connectivity is taken for granted as a commodity, but it's not. In fact, it is very essential to these businesses. It's something that without it, those businesses will not work anymore or will not be optimized as they're supposed to be. So starting from this and starting from the fact that connectivity has different values depending on how the SLA is, on how relevant, let's say, the key network performance are to that business, I think that the approach we should follow, at least the approach we're trying to follow, is more on the horizontal approach than the vertical approach. I mean, we heard this morning, and I agree, we cannot chase every single vertical, every single application, because as soon as you get into a vertical, you really get deep into the business logics and the business dynamics and the business environment specific to that, which are very, very different, and we cannot afford to do that. And I don't even know whether the right approach would be to select few and become end-to-end vertical to that. We tried that a number of times. To to my understanding, not much with success. I think we should be leveraging on the assets we have, and the asset we have is typically a massive approach on the horizontal part, which is, of course, not just the connectivity, although connectivity is a premium part, an essential part of the business, but connectivity plus platform, plus analytics, plus API, but still, let me say, in a value-added but horizontal approach. The vertical go-to-market, of course, has to be done through probably partnerships and relationships with subject matter experts that are relevant to healthcare, to agriculture, to car, to transportation, to smart city, which is a challenge, by the way, because the go-to-market becomes a sum of relationship between us and intermediate system integrators and so on. However, I think this space is the space, let me say, the horizontal added value space is the place where we want to play. Indeed, if I look at the market, there are many different things. I usually, when I speak about IoT in Italy, I start as a market. I typically talk about metering. Metering is a massive operation, at least in Italy. By regulation, all the meters related to water, gas, electricity will have to be connected in the next 3 years. That's about 60 million meters. So what we see starting a couple of years ago, big large tenders run by the utilities to activate such meters, and that's a very huge market which we address nicely. It's a regulated market with specific SLAs, and again, the respect of SLA and the let me say reliability of what we can provide is an asset we can play well, I think.
Okay, thank you, Enrico. So kind of a different approach there. Tom, I'm pretty sure most people won't know a huge amount about what you guys are doing in IoT, and it's kind of what we talked about ahead of this panel. So maybe just sort of explain about what your strategy is here.
Yeah, sure. So you're right, especially in the UK, people won't think through in IoT too much. They'll kind of think through in kind of quirky consumer advertising campaigns, which is kind of our heartland. But I can maybe split it in two. So from a group perspective and what we're trying to do across globally and with our 12 mobile operators, our focus are any manufacturer that makes a device centrally and then deploys it globally. So the obvious ones there are car manufacturers and major consumer electronics manufacturers. So those we can speak to and position the 6 networks we have in Europe and the 6 networks we have in Asia Pac, and how we can enable them to get connected and live in all markets from one central point of contact and one central platform in Jasper. From a local operator perspective, it's very fragmented and very different, really subject to what each country is doing. So in Italy, we have quite a sizable smart metering base. That's very much where their focus is. There's still a number of tenders going on in Italy at the moment, as Enrico alluded to. So they've got a big focus there. Our Irish business are very successful in security, so commercial alarm systems. Austria are very diverse. I mean, to give an example, they've recently done a deal with a company that do tour buses for rock stars that travel all across Europe, and they just do like the Wi-Fi backhaul. There's no end of use cases those guys have got. And then you've got the UK, Sweden, and Denmark, who are a bit different in that they are the only operators we have, certainly in Europe, who don't have a 2G network. And what that has forced those guys to do is to focus on the traditionally the high data markets, so digital signage, CCTV, Wi-Fi backhaul, because without a 2G market, they're unlikely to get smart metering or security products. So that's kind of historically been their focus, and they've also probably relied more on the reseller, aggregator, MVNO channel, subject to what you want to call it, whereas across the other markets, we tend to go more direct.
Lovely, thank you. So again, another sort of slightly different approach. Greg, Cisco Jasper obviously works with a huge number of telcos on the IoT space. So you kind of get a much broader view. As I said, we've always had sort of three completely sort of differing types of approaches to a certain extent. What are you seeing in the market, particularly maybe in Europe, about some of the other sort of ways that telcos are approaching this enterprise space, and maybe some lessons that have been learned from your side?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I have the privilege, or I should say my team has the privilege of working with, just within Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Russia, over 20 mobile network operators that we partner with. We have a SaaS platform that offers connectivity management. We actually work with BT, with the 3 Group, as well as the line of business for IoT in Italy, which is called
Pure coincidence.
That's right?
Pure coincidence.
Pure coincidence, yeah, absolutely pure coincidence. So, in terms of verticals, I mean, our platform is quite horizontal in that sense, and we try to keep things that way by adding certain features there that allows for customization in the platform that make it relevant for a given enterprise. And I mean, the use cases are all over the place. I guess it could be anywhere from startups that are trying to, get into very interesting areas in like agriculture, or into, as one I learned about recently, actually it's in Italy, which Enrico may know about. There's one vendor that's monitoring high-value wine bottles of red wine, which is really an interesting NB-IoT use case. But I mean, it's really all over the place: high bandwidth, medium bandwidth, and low bandwidth. And the technologies now that are, I guess, that's got a lot of media coverage at the minute is kind of low power, wide area NB-IoT, but that's really in its infancy at the moment, I would say. But there's loads of other use cases. I mean, you'd have to probably ask me more specific questions, I suppose, to give you more specific answers. But it's right across the piece.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I'm sort of kind of keen to sort of go there sort of with a deep dive on each of these different approaches. So, Martin, we'll go back to you on the retail side. I mean, again, when we were sort of talking about this event, you would tell me about some of the challenges that you're facing, and proving the business case was one that sort of came up. Do you want to sort of talk a little bit about what the challenges that you face there, and how you're looking to overcome that?
Yeah, sure. I think just before I go on to that, I think, you mentioned a different approach. I'm not sure that, I'm not actually sure how different the approach is. I think that I bring out retail as a vertical where we've got quite a deep knowledge. And so we are going to market with some retail-focused propositions. But I agree that that operators, and we certainly are as well, taking a horizontal approach. And I think a good example of that is asset intelligence. So when you look at asset intelligence, what you're actually measuring of that asset determines potentially which vertical that you go into. And I think the other thing to keep in mind with verticals is how deep you go into that vertical. So from a BT point of view, we've got lots and lots of learning. So for example, we run the biggest fleet, I think, in the UK. We've got one of the biggest logistics operations in the UK. We're certainly one of the biggest employers. So we are actually doing the inside-out strategy, where there's lots of IoT solutions that we're putting in place in our own internal organisation, which will enable us to go out to market, which brings me on to the point that you're making. So what are the challenges? One of the challenges is scalability. And I think that what we're definitely learning is that there's proof. I think there's 72% of global enterprises have some form of IoT proof of concept already in place globally. But how many of those, and that that's forecast to rise to pretty much 100% in the next few years. But how many of them have scaled, across international boundaries? So that's a challenge. And I think that the proof of the technology is there, and it's actually been there for some time. I think where the challenge comes is, how do you put together all the elements of the IoT solution, the devices, the connectivity, potentially on an international basis, the applications? How do you put all of that together? How do you secure it? And then the impact that's got on a business's processes. How do you take a business through that journey? So for an organisation like, and potentially all the operators, but for an organisation like BT, we would say we're very well placed because we've got that international footprint. We've got the connectivity solutions, we've got the partner ecosystem, we've got 2,500 people working on security, and we've also got a professional services arm, which is critical to taking the customer through that journey. And I think that's where, potentially one of the biggest challenges, all of those elements are challenges to scalability. And if we can get through that, then it makes the business case provable, and we'll see more people rolling out IoT solutions on scale.
Okay. Greg, you want to agree with that, I think?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I noticed in working with operators across in the region that I'm in is that pretty early on for their go-to-market IoT strategies, they need to decide, are they going to be a horizontal player or are they going to go for the vertical? And provide full solutions within the vertical of their targeted segments that they want to go after. And what I have found is that most of them start off with horizontal. They have ambitions for vertical. And most of them actually stay horizontal, but those ones that tend to go vertical, it's a resource-intensive play. So you need to have the organization and the commitment and the resources to do that.
Yeah. And Enrico, that's obviously what Telecom Italia have decided. Maybe sort of talk about some of the challenges that you're facing as you look to increase what you're doing there. I mean, I think we talked about, for example, the complexity of the business chain was one.
Yes, this is a point. I think we started working seriously on IoT, let's say 18, 24 months ago. Of course, machine to machine has been there for many years, but the let's say the IoT concept is around that time. And we found, and we still find today, that there is a lot of teaching, explaining, showing, creating awareness to do in the market. I mean, there are plenty. Of course, if you speak to large companies, mention BMWs and the others, they understand. But there are plenty of medium-sized, smaller-sized businesses. They don't have the skills, the knowledge, the understanding. So we found ourselves to do a lot of mentoring around this. And in order to do this, as an example, 20 months ago, we opened up a lab in our lab facilities in Torino, an IoT open lab. And over the last 20 months, we've seen like 80, 85 companies coming in the labs, doing things, either IoT module, network integration, app development, end-to-end solution, field trials with utilities, and all sorts of stuff. Because the market needs to understand, needs to get not much the technical issues, but the benefit out of the technical issues. And I see this still as very necessary, at least in the market we address, very necessary. Which means also building the ecosystem of the end-to-end, from modules to equipment, customer equipment, network integration, API development, analytics development, the end application, and maybe all the way down to the process redesign, because as we said many times, IoT is is very much linked with digitalization, which is linked with business redesign. And of course, we cannot and we don't want to do all this by ourselves. So the ecosystem building is another part of the go-to-market.
And Martin was saying that's a very kind of resource-intensive job, right? So how do you kind of try and make that as easy as possible?
Well, as I said, we try to focus on the part we believe we're strong in, and we try to engage different subject matter experts, can be system integrator, and go with them to end customers to show the potential of the new technology, and together with these partners, and we've been fairly successful. I mean, we've seen many companies that didn't know much about it, and after the trial, after the demos, after the joint design activities, they now understood and they engaged into real project. But as I said, it's it's a combination of partnerships to do the end-to-end. It's not one for all.
Yeah, sure. Tom, when we spoke, I think you were talking about the importance of kind of being focused and deciding what to kind of focus on and what to say no to. Maybe you want to sort of expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I guess the name itself, I mean, the Internet of Things, it is basically everything, and you can obviously get lost in it. So, yeah, as we discussed, I mean, we're very focused on, well, what are we not going to do, and make sure that the whole of the business is very clear on that. That's not to say if a great opportunity came in, we wouldn't all jump, and I'm sure try and do it. But, I mean, take healthcare, for example. I think for a long time, healthcare being mentioned as something that could hugely benefit from IoT, and I don't dispute that at all. I think there's huge innovations that could be made in healthcare by adopting IoT, but it's just fraught with regulation and challenges at the moment. So I think certainly from our point of view, it's not something we're really focused on right now. There's lots of other more immediate opportunities in IoT, and should some barriers come down to healthcare or some new device come out that everybody adopts that requires connectivity, then absolutely we'll jump on board. But that would certainly be one for now that we're probably not too focused on.
Going back to the internal side of things, which I think is kind of quite an initial one that's come up a few times this morning. Martin, you talked about having this sort of centre of excellence and that type of thing. How does BT really kind of look to, as we say, kind of almost skill the staff to be able to deliver and sell and do everything that's necessary with regards to the Internet of Things?
Well, I think there's two things. One is by going through the experience ourselves. So I mentioned earlier our fleet, our logistics operations, our people. We're rolling out some retail solutions in our own EE stores. So I think the first thing would be we do it through experience. So we will have experience when we've done this, when we've been through that process of transforming some of the biggest operations in Europe. So I think that will give us some very, very good credentials and learning. The other thing is activating our sales channels. So there's lots of work that we're doing. So we act as a specialist sales force, but there's lots of work that we're doing in terms of training and developing the knowledge base in BT, because if we've got thousands of salespeople out there having the IoT discussion, that's a positive thing. And to be honest, it also helps the sale of our broader set of solutions as well. I think there's another statistic that 92% of CEOs are interested in having the discussion about how IoT will impact their business over the next 5 years. That's the kind of discussion that BT wants to be having with them. So, I won't say that it's not to get thousands of people talking knowledgeably about IoT, is a challenge. But at the highest level in terms of how can IoT start supporting these different verticals, I think that's something that we're actively doing.
Okay. Enrico, in Italy, when Telecom Italia goes out, whether it's for a tender or whether to try and get some new business, is it the other telcos that you find are sort of the major, competitor there, or are there other players, other threats from other markets that you're coming up against? What's your sense of the overall kind of competition type discussion?
Well, typically yes. If the tender is about connectivity, yes, of course there is competition with other telcos. However, depending on the application on the market, there are also competition from non-licensed solutions. There are market segments that are trying to build their own networks using traditionally LoRa Sigfox type of applications. I see this more in the past than in the current days. I mean, actually the final, however late, stability of narrowband IoT solution and full deployment, I think is getting recognition from the markets. So I see less and less attempts to rebuild the network for specific applications, specifically if you're talking about a very large, let's say, coverage. If it's just an industrial plant, it's another issue. But if you want to cover territory, a city, or a place like that. So that is the kind of competition we see. Of course, the other market dynamics is that we're trying to go from, let's say, bottom up, from the network up to the application, maybe with partnerships, but also we see competition top down. So starting from the actual vertical sector subject matter experts or relevant players to build-in connectivity as part of their own top-down offering. In a way, we become hidden inside some sort of end-to-end solution. And that's another market dynamics that it's very dependent on the, let's say, the approach that the specific vertical is taking.
Okay. And Tom, quite a diverse mix of markets that Three owns. So I said you're trying to sort of set out a strategy which is kind of can be applied across all of them, but it's going to be sort of quite certain to extent market by market. What some of the challenges that you're facing there in terms of what works across all of them and what's very kind of specific?
Yeah, so I mean, as I alluded to, so in the UK, Sweden, and Denmark, we don't have a 2G network, and also we don't have much of a presence historically in enterprise at all. We do a bit of small business, but that's it. But all of them are keen to start accelerating and do a lot more in IoT. So what we're looking at is, well, where do we already have experience and capability across the group? And in large cases, that's where we've made an acquisition or merged with somebody, as recently the case is in Italy or in Austria or in Ireland in the last 5 years. Looking at what those guys have in terms of support, people, platforms, and then how do we easily expand that so that the UK, Sweden, Denmark, even our operators in Southeast Asia can start utilising it as well. So it's a nice cost-effective way for us to expand and get those guys live, but also just offer a consistent service across all markets.
Lovely. Just had a look at the time there. We've chatted away for quite a long time. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask any of our panellists? Obviously, so a wide range of competition skill sets and interest there. Yeah, sure.
My name is Barbara Pareglio. I work for GSMA. One of the questions that you mentioned, you mentioned that the difficulty is still the knowledge, how to reach out to companies, understand what they can do with IoT and what are the opportunity. How do you see in the future to try to increase the knowledge? Enterprises or big companies is easier, but what about the medium and small enterprises? How do you go about to reach these companies?
Martin, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think that's an approach that we as an industry are taking. Actually, it's probably the wrong approach. So what it's about, it's customers have got business problems at all levels, and it's about solving their business problems. It's not about saying this is IoT, you should have it. So, and I think, where does somebody made the point earlier, where does IoT stop and start? Who knows really? It's so broad. So what we're doing is we've got IoT solutions, but as you can imagine, a company like BT has got a whole range of digital transformation solutions, networking solutions, security solutions. And for us, particularly at the larger enterprise space, it's about solving business problems. And if IoT forms part of that, fine. But why we don't have to call it IoT. It's a solution.
Anyone else want to come back on the knowledge part for SMEs in particular? And
my vision, understanding, let's say, for the near future for IoT and even more for 5G, is that we will see the appearance of let me say vertical specialized MVNOs, B2B type of MVNOs. So MVNO that is not working on just retail low price type of things, but there are in a way segment specific. And they will close the gap between the horizontal capabilities of network and platform and the specific vertical market, be it retail, be it automotive, transportation, healthcare, and whatever. And I believe very much this is very much part of the 5G vision, with the use cases being built together with the network and all the discussion we see, which in my view will translate into this new, let me say, or maybe not so new, but in a way very clear market actor being a specialized B2B MVNO, which will close this gap.
Yeah. Obviously, Tom, your job title is IoT and MVNO. Have you got a view on that? Is that a sort of a vision that
any
that you
acronym
agree
that doesn't have a home? Yeah, I mean, obviously, an IoT customer actually is no different from an MVNO. I mean, if you think what an MVNO has is they've got the ability to sort of take the network and remodel it, repackage it however they want. They can activate, deactivate their own SIMs. They can rebrand. They can sell to consumers. All that's exactly the same for an IoT customer or an MVNO. And I think it's definitely feasible. And I think Matt maybe mentioned it this morning that with things like NB-IoT coming along and idly operators not filling up those networks immediately, there is a great opportunity for vertical specific MVNOs to pop up focused on things like NB-IoT and really go after that market. And I maybe just add on the experience point about SMEs who don't understand the benefits of IoT. I think sadly it's probably just a word of mouth thing eventually. You know, one company will adopt it, their competitors will see that, oh, they're doing really well, how do they do that? And then they'll adopt it. And the main reason for that is, and lots of people probably empathise in the room, it's quite difficult to find the right person to speak to about IoT. Lots of companies just aren't structured for it. So you find one company who is reasonably well structured, you get a few solutions in there, they start adopting them, and then other companies start appointing people just purely focused on IoT. I mean, you can go in and speak to those and so on and so on.
Great. Any other questions?
A question around accessing different types of customer base, maybe targeted at the operators. Do you have a view as to where it's cost effective for you to target a customer directly given the resources needed versus at what point in terms of number of connections does it not make sense and actually a third party is better at getting your products to that end customer base because you don't have to have the sales and support touch points, but you can generate some good gross profit. Do you have a sort of sense of where kind of entry level number of connections would be where you say I'll do this versus go to my preferred partners?
It is a really difficult one. If you do it purely on connections, I mean, our UK business doesn't have anywhere near the number of connections of our Italian business, but the average revenue they do and the volume of data each one does compared to the ones we have in smart meters is astronomical. So it is really difficult. I mean, we can all kind of draw that sort of triangle that says, well, the long tail, and you'd probably say, well, let's set up as many resellers as possible to go after that. The bit in the middle, we can probably, this is actually probably our own business probably, the bit in the middle, we can, it's a decent market for us to go after direct. And then the very top end, given the three brand isn't in some places really affiliated with huge enterprise, that's maybe where we partner again as well with other credible system integrators. That's probably how we would structure ourselves. I wouldn't want to put a marker on to say where is the cut-off point for each one. There's naturally going to be overlap, but that's roughly how we'd go after it.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly haven't got a number of connections, but I think it obviously goes down. I think that you make a valid point that needs to be assessed in the qualification of how we go after these opportunities. And I think the further we go up the value stack, the more that kind of comes down, if you like. And the other thing from a BT perspective, it's one element is going up the value stack. The other one is share of wallet, so that you're not just going in and selling, for example, we're not just going in and selling an MB-IoT connectivity solution. We've got a broad range of interactions with that account, and I think we would see it on that horizontal basis and how deep we go into the vertical as well.
Okay, Greg, I was going to come at you for a bit of a summing up, if that's okay. I mean, it said this is the enterprise IoT opportunity. So you kind of got a really kind of wide view about what's sort of going on and what operators are doing. What is your kind of ultimate sense of how the telcos are performing currently in terms of what they're going to market with their enterprise IoT solutions?
It's, I guess, a bit of a mixed bag. Really depends on the maturity of the operator and how long they've been involved in M2M and IoT. If they were involved early on, kind of in the M2M space, you see that they kind of developed early on experience, which they then use to build on kind of their IoT propositions. Yeah, I suppose that would probably be where I see things. I could talk a little bit about, I suppose, areas where, I mean, the gentleman out there was asking where do you make the dividing point between, you know, when do you work with partners or resellers to address, you know, maybe small businesses or something like that. I can definitely say a few words about that. Again, it's probably mostly on an ARPU-based level to see, because some customers, like in media and broadcasting, they don't have a lot of connections per se, but the average revenue per device is gigantic. So they tend to go direct on the high revenue earners. But I think that no matter what, most of the operators do choose a partnering strategy, and they do set up a reseller network, and they'll utilize them. And also, it's to give them further reach. You'll have some operators that are in relatively small countries, for example, and they'll use resellers in different countries, particularly in Europe, to give them a better reach into other markets. That's particularly the case here in the UK. You see a lot of operators that are kind of based on the continent, and they'll be partnering with IoT resellers in the UK.
Great. Well, we've run out of time, but thank you all very much indeed for a very interesting panel. Martin, Greg, Tom, and Enrico, thank you very much indeed.